Hello and welcome back, everyone, here tonight on a new episode of the Adam Hazara Show. We're going live here at 7 p.m. here on Memorial Day, May 26, 2025. Hope you guys have been having a jolly old weekend. I've been having a pretty good weekend myself. And of course, as always, here on the Adam Hazara Show, we have a lot to talk about yet again today. Of course, big news, both in Braddock baseball and softball. We're actually going to be starting off on the softball side of things today. They're coming off a district finals loss to West Springfield, 10-2. Pretty big loss. We'll talk about that. And, of course, we'll be previewing their outlook for regionals, as well as on the baseball side. Of course, they're coming off district loss to West Springfield as well. But in the district semifinals, we'll be previewing their regional outlook as well, too. So before we begin, of course, make sure you guys subscribe to the Adam Hazara Show. Of course, always leave a like as well. Share with a friend and subscribe so you do, or I should say, turn on notifications so you do not miss another episode of the show. So thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. And let's get into it here on the Adam Hazara Show, special edition here on Memorial Day. So like I said, we are going to start off with the softball side of things. I know we don't usually do that here on the show, but some bigger headlines over on the softball side of things. So that's where we're going to start off with here tonight on a show. So before, of course, we get to the big district finals game, let's kind of go over that district semifinal game versus South County real quick. Of course, 3-2 win over South County in the district semifinals. And let me just say real quick, right off the bat, that was really a game that the Lady Bruins probably didn't deserve to win. Again, most of the game, of course, a win is still a win. But again, it was just a lot of pure luck. But first of all, let's talk about the positives that game before we get into the negatives. So, of course, the positives is that I do want to start the show off on a more positive note since there is more negative to look at, but we'll get into that. Mackenzie Verdejo, of course, the Bruins ace, pitched well enough to get the Bruins that win and keep them in the game to score those runs, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. There were some times where she did get into a bit of rough patches and some trouble, but she was able to work out of those innings and get the job done overall to have another good outing versus South County and pitch well enough to keep the Bruins in the game once again. Again, it's a game that they really shouldn't have won. And that's due to the fact that they really didn't really make the runs themselves. They didn't really score the runs themselves. It was really because they got lucky with the fact that South County made errors in the biggest spots, and these are errors on routine play. So if you believe in heaven, then you could say those were moments in that game where you could say it was the gift from heaven that the Bruins should have won that game, or should have lost, I should say. So, of course, the offense, of course, wasn't the best. Really, technically, they should have been shut out had South County not made those errors. When they did, they just ended up choking at the most inauspicious times. And so, so for the Bruins, of course, again, a lot of what it had to do with was the bottom part of the offense, but struck out 8 times against Maddie Grice, and that is from the 6 through 9 spots. Now, Maddie Grice over at South County, she's not known to be the most spectacular strikeout pitcher. Now, if you look at her stats on MaxPreps, she does have more strikeouts than innings pitched. Yes, that is true. But you got to remember the district this year, a lot of the teams, about half or a little more than half, the whole district has lineups that aren't very good. That goes for a lot of teams. Lake Braddock, not really one of them. There has been worse in the district this year with some other teams to mention. But again, the 6 through 9 for the Bruins, we talked about it many times this year. that is going to be kind of the Achilles heel for this Bruins team, is whether or not they would do well. And so this game is one of those games where they did not do well. And again, if they have good stats and are starting, it's probably because, again, they faced also some teams with bad pitching. We talked about the offense as well. It's more of a down year in the district, not as much competition. Robinson and West Potomac, two teams the last few years who have been good and competitive. They're not really there nearly as much this year. So there's that going for the Bruins in the district. But again, there was not really a lot of action. I think there was more pressure put on the top 1 through 5, which is hit well. Most of the season, you could probably trust those hitters. But again, the 6 through 9 hitters struck out 8 times. The 1 through 5 lineup only struck out 2 times the whole game. And again, Grice gets a lot of those strikeouts because of the fact that there's a lot of bad lineups in the district. So, again, the Bruins just kind of got lucky, and they really shouldn't be in the district finals. But, again, a win is a win. It should have really been South County West Springfield. Then we carries us to the district finals game. Man, a lot went down this game. A lot to talk about. And just a very, very disastrous 10-2 loss to the Spartans, who go up and win the Patriot District title now for the first time in 3 years. Bruins lose their second district title game for the second year in a row. And the second year in a row where the offense not hitting has come back to bite them. So last year, they got shut out. That was, that's what happened last year. This year, they were only able to score 2 runs off Andre Yagoy, who, for the Spartans, were out a lot, especially throughout the beginning of the game, was throwing out riser right by all of the Bruins hitters. A lot of the lineup had a lot of trouble catching up to it. A lot of the hitters' bat speed was lagging, and they're just late at swinging. Now, that's obviously probably because the Bruins aren't used to facing Yagoy speed, who looks like she was throwing mid-high 60s, maybe even hitting 70 miles per hour a few times on that fastball. But again, the Bruins really struggling against her. Bottom of the lineup, again, was still also not as consistent that game. And so, there's another struggle right there. But of course, the big focal point in this game was the fact that Mackenzie Verdejo had yet another rough outing versus the Spartans. That was her third outing this year where she had struggled against the Spartans. And especially, of course, it started off with the 3 home runs that she gave up in the first inning, back-to-back home runs, given up to Nally Coughlin. I believe, who was the other players? It was actually Alexa Harvey first, Nally Coughlin, and then Kate Middendorf. And then she gave up 4 runs in the first off those 3 home runs. And she gave up another run in the second. The Spartans were up 5-0 quickly within the first 2 innings. And so the Bruins, Coach Collazo felt like, Mackenzie was being hit too hard. And so he had to take out Verdejo after just 2 innings of work, giving up 5 earned runs. And with Sarah Allen, who pitched the rest of the game, who pitched 4 innings, didn't do much better. Gave up 5 runs of her own 2 through 4 innings. But she was, that she was ended up pitching the whole game. But, it was kind of weird, seeing Verdejo not only go 2 innings, even if the Bruins were down 5 runs. I feel like there was still, a little bit of more room there to give her some more innings to pitch and try to work, into a groove. Again, this is someone who we're talking about who has been the ace for the Bruins the last couple of years, a 2-time second-team All-State pitcher, multiple mentions, a 2-time team MVP, and she was still the district pitcher of the year this year. Now, a lot of people haven't mentioned this, but her numbers have been a bit more down this year. Now, when I mean down, they haven't been terrible by any means, but again, the numbers are not as nearly as dominant as compared to the first 2 years. Definitely her ERA's gone up a bit. The strikeout numbers have gone down. The hit numbers have gone up a little bit. Not really sure what the cause is. An argument there is that maybe the district has gotten more used to facing Verdejo a lot more now that she's been the district for years now. But again, she's still been able to do pretty well against most of the teams in the district. It's not like she's been struggling a huge amount to the extent where she has like a 4 or 5 ERA, if you guys know what I mean. She's still been overall very solid. She's still been good against, some good South County lineups multiple times this year. But the one team that she has not been able to get over her hump is, of course, that very good Spartans team. And Mackenzie is at part, again, a lot, in some part to blame for the Bruins loss. Of course, both, the pitching was not very good. Of course, a lot of assets. The Bruins just didn't really seem like they were on a lot of cylinders this game. Again, talk about the offensive side of things. The Bomba lineup still is not hit. A lot of holes, 6 through 9, not coming up big when they've needed to. Whoever they've really put out there, Isabella Sevier, Eva Dubray. We've seen Lauren Allen out there. A lot of those hitters have not really come up big against those better teams that they face. Again, they have good numbers. Some of those players have good numbers against some of the more worse teams with bad pitching. But again, they have not come up against those good pitching staffs, such as schools like when facing West Springfield. So there's another hole, a lot of holes right there. Of course, that's going to be a big concern. And that's something the Bruins have had to deal with this whole year. We're going to have to deal with the rest of the year. It's the best they have. So they're just going to have to kind of make do with all that for right now. But you kind of really wonder, if it's interesting to see how, the conversations going on for Verdejo after that really tough outing following, only being able to pitch 2 innings. And, she has never been pulled like that. I'm pretty sure that was a moment for her. But, it was a very hard moment for her. But, again, she, Coach Clausa didn't really feel like she was getting the job done. I feel like, like I said, there could have been more room to give her a bit of trust. I think, with how much she's been great for the Bruins on a pitching level, she could have definitely, I think, stayed out there a bit longer. And I think there were some innings there where you could have used her more, despite how hard she was getting hit by the Spartans lineup. And you could have, again, given her more leeway because, of all the Bruins pitchers, she probably gives you the best chance more than anybody. Again, this is someone who's talking about back-to-back second team, 2-time All-State pitcher again. Thank you so much, Will, for tuning in to the Adam Hazara Show today. Thank you for a comment. And so later on, you kind of wonder, I'm pretty sure people have brewing questions. Is Mackenzie still the ace or whatever? Mackenzie is still going to be the ace. Again, like I said, she hasn't been, she has not been terrible at all. She still was also a district pitcher of the year this year. And that might be the first year it's awarded in the district, but she still earned it. She's still had very solid numbers. And again, I feel like it's the one hump she really has to get over is, again, just West Springfield. I don't know why she is showing against West Springfield now. Look, West Springfield has a very good lineup. Every hitter in that lineup, 1 through 9, is a huge threat, has a lot of power. Everyone in that lineup is a tough out, tough at bat, tough hitter to work around. But I don't really feel like that's a good enough excuse when we've seen Verdejo do better against some very good South County lineups in the past, of course, in the district, and other very good lineups as well. Robinson's had some very good offenses last year. She's been able to pitch very well against them a multitude of times. There's been West Springfield, a couple West Springfield games in the past as well where she's pitched very well against them. She's only allowed 1 run or she shut them out. So again, I don't know what it is really that is, being a bugaboo for Verdejo. But again, her and the Bruins staff will, have to go over that, throughout regionals, before they face a team as tough as West Springfield or South County again, if they get that far, which they should. I was going to say right now, the regional outlook, doesn't look too tough. Again, South County and West Springfield was mentioned multiple times on the show. The only two teams you really have to really worry about in terms of who is going to be a threat to Lake Braddock. And I'm not really sure what the regional bracket looks like yet for softball in 6C. I think as much as I know, Lake Braddock, whoever they host on Friday for region quarterfinals, will be the winner of the Fairfax Thomas Jefferson game. And one of those, they should beat either of those two teams. A very bad Fairfax team, and then again you have a very a TJ team has done well in national, but really outside of national, that they're not going to do well. So overall, since they're not on a level as some of the other a lot of the other talent in the areas, is usual case of a lot of national district teams, still the case for the Colonials this year. So they should still win that game. But I don't know if they would even really face West Springfield or South County on their side of the bracket until at least the region finals. So it should be a very straightforward, easy path for them to states if that is the case. Again, I don't know if, we'll post it online if, what the regional brackets look like. But just want to say that real quick. And another point I wanted to hit on is that, for the Bruins in that game, we talk about, they talked about before the season how, there's need, how they were going to have to be more aggressive on the base pass this year, how the team was going to be more speed oriented and putting pressure on the base pass. And, it was very interesting in, some of these games against the tougher opponents this year, like West Springfield or SoCo, but it's not nearly happened as much as you would like it. I think they only had 1-2 stolen bases across all the games. You expect, usually the Bruins, usually see them be more aggressive than that. And I understand, West Springfield has Coughlin behind the plate, who's a very good catcher. She has a very good throwing arm. But, even if it's someone like, let's just say Pudge Rodriguez was behind the plate for West Springfield, you should still be running. And especially, with how tough of a pitcher, and like an uphill battle will be against a pitcher like Andre Yagoy, who is a strikeout machine in the circle. She struck out 13 again versus Lake Braddock as well. And how hard, how much she was making the Bruins swing and miss. You need to have some sort of momentum on the other team. You need and have it on your backs. You need to find some way to wreak havoc on the bases, and that's the way the Bruins, should do things. And, they're very, the one thing the Bruins, another positive form, they have a lot of very nimble and athletic players that work well with that speed. And so, we talk about that bottom of the lineup too, the bottom of the lineup that's going to be very inconsistent. Your 1 through 5 or whoever gets on, whoever that may be, you need to make sure that they, you need to make sure that they try to be aggressive, and, you need to make sure, you're trying to take more chances, because that's what's going to give you momentum, and that's what's going to put pressure on the other team. That's what's going to increase your chances of scoring those runs, especially again against a team like West Springfield, who is going to be Petro, like even they've been who have a really good lineup. And who the Bruins have, struggled keeping up with a lot of times this year. That's the way you want to put pressure on. That's the way to get an early lead in the game. So, we'll see if they do that in regionals. Again, Verdejo, we'll see how she adjusts, throughout regionals. Again, I think the first game or two of regionals shouldn't be nearly as hard. At least the first game against Fairfax or TJ, those are some of the lesser competitive lineups. And so that will probably give her a breather. Again, when she does pitch on Friday. So we get to see again, that'll be a chance for her to, Bruins give her a chance to get back on her feet. And the Bruins are still going to trust her. I don't believe that, anyone else is going to take her place in the ace pitcher role of the team. But again, again, the Bruins have a lot to figure out. They need to figure out, they some way for bomb out lineup. They need to figure out, they need to get Verdejo right for how they, for especially if they face West Springfield again or face a good South County lineup again. And the stuff for Verdejo is still there, but, it's just, a matter of trying to find that stuff again, and more so, kind of more of a dominance that we saw from her the first 2 years, which again hasn't been there as much this year, but, it's still there. We definitely know it's still in the tank. Again, it's just about execution and having that dominance, which he's really going to need versus West Springfield, especially with some of the Bruins' more offense struggles versus the bottom of the lineup. So that will end it there on the softball side. So they're going to get a first-round bye for regionals, have a first game on Friday. Let's move over to baseball now, as we're about 22 minutes into the show here on the Adam Hazara Show. Baseball had, let's talk about it. So, of course, they were going into that West Springfield game. You were thinking that there was optimism after they hit Austin Dean for 5 runs against West Potomac. Unfortunately, they had a little bit of trouble against Aaron Dirks at West Springfield again, and they end up losing that game 4-2. The offense, again, you were thinking that, again, more momentum. Offense has been hit or miss this year a lot of times. You were expecting that they were going to be able to figure out Dirks more. And they had a lot of trouble with it. I think it took more so towards the end of the game when he started to lose some stamina that they finally were able to hit him. And the Bruins, again, you expect them to have, again, on the mound, they decide to pitch Leo DeLoma versus West Springfield, who, Leo, and it's not saying he's a bad pitcher, but with how consistent he's been this year with a 70 ERA, very surprising the Bruins did not go with Jack Cavalario, who has, again, been in those high-pressure situations this year against teams like West Springfield and good lineups like Alexandria City, and who's pitched well against them, but he wasn't in there. And you talk about the Bruins trying to have their 2 best pitchers. They had both. They didn't have, Cavallari. He wasn't even in all that game. I don't even think they plan on using him. Again, they were forced to bring in Bo after Leo struggled to get his command down in the first couple of innings. West Springfield was able to get some runs off him, and so Bruins didn't trust him go past. I think it was the second or third inning they got taken out, and it went to Bo Padgett, the ace. They were forced to bring in to prevent things from getting more out of control, and it wasn't really out of control. But again, the Bruins again didn't want to take any other chances. But again, it doesn't really make a lot of sense how Cav has not been again this year. We talk about the some of the interesting decisions that the pitching management has made for Lake Braddock. And, say, well, Cav has been injured. Well, he might be injured. And it's very interesting. He hasn't pitched in nearly a month. Now, I don't know if he's been doing injuries in that time or whatever, but I know that when you're at West Potomac at Fairfax, he was warming up in the bullpen. So you probably could have had, so if he's healthy, let's say if he is healthy, he should have been pitching in that West Springfield game, because he was also honorable mention for all district as well. Should have been pitching in that game over Delomo. You have Bo again, who was pitching, right decision there. And you could argue, well, they were probably saving him for a district finals game. Well, you probably facing an opponent like West Springfield is a top 20 team in the state right now of Virginia. That was a game where you probably needed to have your 2 best guys available, especially against your bloody rival, who, again, is not just a good team, they're a top 20 team in the state. So, if Cav was healthy to pitch, then he should have pitched that game. That was the game where, it was kind of the feeling of the district final, and so you should have been going all out. And that's what West Springfield is doing with Aaron Dirks and Miles Thompson. Their 2 best pitchers they had available, and there's a stark difference there. Trying to start Delomo. And again, the only way he'd be starting if Cavalario is injured. But he should have been starting again, because he's been a more consistent guy this year, and I would trust him more over Delomo with how he's been inconsistent this year. Now the Bruins, are walking into regionals this week with a couple of games against some national district opponents. Probably the first time in years they're facing multiple national district opponents in the postseason. They have Annandale at home tomorrow, and then the winner of that game, most likely, in my opinion, be Braddock. They'll go to Mount Vernon on Friday to face the majors in the region quarterfinals. So the Bruins tomorrow, they're facing a national district team. Yes, the Bruins have lost some of their, they've had some struggles against some of the worser teams this year, like a Mount Vernon or Edison in national, or they've lost to Woodson once, and the lineup has had some inconsistencies there. But Annandale doesn't really have a lot of special going for him, especially in a pitching staff. Annandale is a 5-16 team. They are 11 games under 500. I want to really say that they're not as good as Woodson. They're not nearly as good as Edison. Edison has blown them out both meetings this year. And so that should be a game the Bruins should be able to mercy rule them in at least, at minimum 6 innings. It's a team that the Bruins must beat. And, the Bruins are probably not going to have Bo Padgett pitch tomorrow. It'll probably be Del Olmo or Cavalario. If Cavalario is healthy or whoever's healthy, they're going to pitch against Annandale. You're going to want to save Bo Padgett for a later game, especially a region semis game where it would probably be one if they face West Springfield again, which we'll talk about, at a later time, most likely. So, very lowly Annandale team that they're facing at, I believe, is 5-16 last time I checked. They should win against tomorrow. And despite the offensive inconsistencies, with the way that they've hit, Austin Dean, getting 5 runs off an ACC arm, they should be able to score against a very lowly Annandale pitching staff. So, a lot of high expectations for that game tomorrow. They should be able to score a lot of runs off whoever Annandale's pitching is. It's a very thin pitching staff. Not a very good team once again. And, they might be, and I see the game on Friday at Mount Vernon being more of a challenge. Now, Mount Vernon has been been very good in national district this year. They've been having one of their better seasons in recent memory. Mount Vernon has actually been able to garner a couple wins versus Edison this year. Again, Edison was a team that beat Lake Braddock during spring break earlier in the season. So for Bruins, there might be a bit of an uphill battle there, as well as maybe a bit of struggles. But again, the Bruins should be able to beat Mount Vernon, though, is still nothing special. Bruins, have actually faced Edison twice this year during spring break, though. Second time they blew them out. And then they also blew out Hayfield as well. And, Mount Vernon has also been blown by Hayfield. So the Bruins have, shown that they can beat some of Bruins have shown, even in a year where they've been a lot more down than previous years, that they can still beat national district teams by a big margin, more so than not. Again, I think this is a game where, you expect the Bruins to do a lot, against, Mount Vernon team that's a lot better this year. They have a quarterback, Hudson Grimsley, is a good AC, tops around 90. He'll probably be pitching that game. But again, it's a game where you really expect the Bruins, though, to do a lot better. And, they should be able to win these 2 games against National District. Bruins have had more experience facing the competition, after facing West Springfield a lot more tougher teams. You should, National District not as tough as the schedule. You should, not as much talent. Bruins have more of a talent. So, those 2 wins should be pretty easy to come. They should, in my opinion, they should blow out both teams and then, be on your way to facing West Springfield, which we will talk about more so next week, since that game would not be happening this week. We're going to say that, we're going to save all those spoils for next week. So again, so big week coming up for Lake Braddock baseball, a couple games, Lake Braddock softball playing Friday. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for tuning in today. About 3 minutes into the show. Leave a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, do not miss another show, and share a friend. Always, everything is really appreciated. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, and bye-bye.